You wake up earlier than you used to. You drink more water. You track your habits. You listen to podcasts about discipline while commuting, read books about success before bed, and constantly search for ways to become a better version of yourself. On paper, everything looks right. You are improving. You are optimizing. You are doing what the world told you would finally bring peace. And yet, something feels strangely heavier. The more you try to fix your life, the more restless your mind becomes. Instead of calm, you feel pressure. Instead of satisfaction, you feel behind. Every improvement reveals another flaw. Every achievement quietly whispers that it is still not enough. You begin to wonder why becoming better feels so exhausting. No one talks about this openly, but many people today are quietly trapped in a paradox. The very pursuit meant to free them has become another source of anxiety. Self-improvement, once a path toward clarity, has slowly turned into a relentless inner demand, a voice that never rests, a standard that constantly moves further away. You scroll through videos telling you to wake up at 5 in the morning. Another tells you to meditate longer. Another insists you must build multiple income streams, master emotional intelligence, train harder, think sharper, become unstoppable. Each message sounds reasonable on its own. Together, they create a silent pressure. You must always be upgrading yourself, and so you try. You measure your productivity. You analyze your habits. You compare your progress with strangers who seem calmer, richer, stronger, wiser. Improvement becomes less about growth and more about escape. Escape from the uncomfortable feeling that who you are right now is insufficient. This is where the quiet suffering begins, because beneath the language of growth lies an unspoken belief that peace exists somewhere in the future version of you. Not now, not here. Only after you become more disciplined, more successful, more emotionally perfect. The modern world rarely questions this belief. It rewards constant striving. It praises optimization. But Stoic philosophy begins with a radically different observation. One that may feel uncomfortable at first. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and one of history's most powerful men, wrote privately to himself, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Notice what he did not say. He did not say happiness comes after perfecting yourself. He did not say peace requires endless improvement. Instead, he suggested something far more unsettling. The problem may not be that you are lacking something, but that you believe you are. Modern self-improvement often feeds dissatisfaction before it offers solutions. It quietly teaches you to observe yourself as a project unfinished, flawed, constantly under construction. You begin to watch your own life from the outside, evaluating every action. Was this productive enough? Was I confident enough? Did I respond correctly? Am I falling behind? You are no longer simply living. You are managing yourself, and management creates tension. Imagine a person sitting at dinner with friends, but instead of enjoying the conversation, they analyze how socially skilled they appear. Imagine someone exercising not because movement feels good, but because they fear becoming inadequate. Imagine ending each day not with gratitude, but with a checklist of failures disguised as goals. The activity may look healthy from the outside, yet internally it becomes a form of quiet self-rejection. The Stoics understood something deeply human. Suffering often comes not from circumstances, but from misplaced expectations. Epictetus taught that distress arises when we attach our peace to things outside our control, including outcomes, reputation, and even our imagined future selves. When self-improvement becomes an attempt to control how life must feel, it turns against you. You begin chasing emotional certainty through achievement, but certainty never arrives. Each improvement resets the baseline. The mind adapts quickly. What once felt impressive soon feels ordinary. Psychologists today call this hedonic adaptation, but the Stoics recognized it long ago. Desire expands faster than fulfillment. You reach one goal, and another immediately replaces it. This creates a subtle but powerful illusion that peace is always one step ahead. Consider how often you postpone calm. You tell yourself you will relax after becoming more disciplined. You will feel confident once you achieve stability. You will finally slow down once you fix everything that feels incomplete. Yet life does not pause while you prepare to live it. The present moment becomes merely a training ground for a future that never quite arrives. Seneca warned about this tendency nearly 2,000 years ago when he wrote that people are always getting ready to live, but never living. The tragedy is not effort itself. Growth is natural. Learning is valuable. The problem appears when improvement becomes driven by fear rather than wisdom. Fear of inadequacy, fear of falling behind, fear of being ordinary. Fear disguises itself as ambition. You may notice this in quiet moments. After finishing a productive day, instead of peace, there is a strange emptiness. The mind immediately searches for the next task. Rest feels uncomfortable because stillness removes distraction, revealing an uneasy question beneath all striving. If you stop improving, are you enough? Stoicism invites you to confront that question directly, not by abandoning growth, but by changing your relationship with it. The Stoics did not pursue improvement to become superior versions of themselves. They practiced discipline to reduce unnecessary desire. They trained the mind not to accumulate more identity, but to depend on less external validation. Improvement was inward simplification, not endless expansion. This difference changes everything. Modern culture says, become more to feel complete. Stoicism says, need less to feel free. Imagine approaching your life without the constant sense of self-correction. You still learn, you still act, but your worth is no longer tied to progress metrics. Success becomes something you practice, not something you chase. Effort becomes expression rather than compensation for perceived inadequacy. You begin to act from steadiness instead of urgency. A person guided by Stoic understanding still wakes early if it serves them, but not to prove discipline. They still work hard, but without attaching identity to results. They still reflect on mistakes, yet without turning reflection into self-criticism. The difference is subtle but profound. Improvement becomes an act of care rather than self-repair. And paradoxically, this mindset often leads to deeper growth, because when anxiety disappears, attention sharpens. When comparison fades, creativity returns. When the need to constantly fix yourself softens, you finally experience moments of genuine presence, moments that self-improvement promised, but rarely delivered. You start noticing small things again. A quiet morning, a conversation without analysis, the relief of not measuring your worth against invisible standards. Peace was never hiding at the end of transformation. It was buried beneath the pressure to transform endlessly. This realization can feel unsettling at first. If constant striving is not the answer, then what replaces it? If improvement alone cannot guarantee peace, how should you live? The Stoics would suggest beginning with a simple shift. Separate who you are from what you achieve. Your actions belong to effort. Your peace belongs to perception. You cannot control outcomes, timelines, or how others measure success, but you can control the meaning you assign to your experience. When meaning changes, pressure loosens. You are allowed to grow without treating your current self as a problem to solve. And perhaps the deepest irony is this: the moment you stop chasing peace as a reward for becoming someone else, you begin to sense it quietly returning, not dramatically, not all at once, but gently, like tension leaving the body after a long effort you didn't realize you were holding. In the next part, we will explore why the human mind becomes addicted to self-optimization, how modern culture amplifies dissatisfaction, and why the Stoics believed that true strength begins not with adding more habits, but with questioning the desires that drive them. There is a moment that many people experience but rarely recognize. It happens late at night, after the productivity apps are closed, after the motivational videos end, when the noise of improvement finally fades. You sit quietly, and instead of feeling accomplished, you feel strangely uneasy. Your mind begins searching for what still needs fixing. Another skill to learn, another weakness to correct, another version of yourself waiting somewhere ahead. This moment reveals something important. The drive to improve has quietly transformed into an inability to rest. At first, self-improvement feels empowering. It offers structure in a chaotic world. Goals provide direction. Habits create momentum. You begin to believe that through enough effort, life can finally become stable and predictable. But slowly, without noticing, improvement stops being a tool and becomes an identity. You are no longer someone practicing growth. You are someone who must always be growing, and anything less feels like failure. Modern culture intensifies this feeling in ways previous generations never experienced. Every day, you are exposed to thousands of examples of optimized lives, perfect routines, calm morning rituals, successful entrepreneurs explaining how discipline changed everything. Even vulnerability becomes curated, carefully presented struggles, followed by triumphant transformation. Your mind absorbs these images quietly. Comparison becomes automatic. You measure your internal experience against someone else's external performance. The Stoics, understood comparison long before social media existed. Epictetus warned that suffering begins when we confuse what belongs to us with what belongs to others. Today, comparison no longer happens occasionally. It happens constantly, and the human brain, designed for small communities, struggles to process endless standards of success. You begin to feel behind in a race you never consciously entered. The problem is not ambition itself. Humans naturally seek progress. The danger appears when improvement becomes tied to emotional security. When you believe that peace depends on achieving enough, controlling enough, becoming enough, your mind enters a permanent state of anticipation. You live psychologically in the future. Consider how often your thoughts begin with once. Once I become more confident. Once I earn more. Once I master my emotions. Once I fix my habits. Peace becomes conditional. Life becomes preparation rather than experience. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that the present moment is the only place life actually occurs. Yet the modern pursuit of optimization pulls attention away from the present toward imagined versions of tomorrow. The mind becomes divided physically here, mentally elsewhere. This division creates quiet exhaustion. Psychologically, the brain interprets unfinished goals as unresolved tension. Each objective remains open in your awareness, demanding energy. When goals multiply endlessly, mental tension never resolves. Even rest feels incomplete because the mind continues calculating improvement. You may notice this when taking a break. Instead of relaxation, guilt appears. A voice whispers that time could be used better. Rest becomes something you must justify. Seneca described this condition with remarkable clarity. He observed that people are not poor because they lack resources, but because their desires expand beyond satisfaction. The more you believe you need in order to feel secure, the more fragile peace becomes. Modern self-improvement often expands desire rather than calming it. You begin wanting better focus, better health, better finances, better relationships, better emotional control, all reasonable goals individually, yet overwhelming collectively. The mind starts treating life as a constant correction process. You are always slightly wrong, slightly incomplete. This creates an invisible psychological contract. Happiness will arrive only after enough corrections are made. But the Stoics questioned this assumption entirely. They believed tranquility does not emerge from perfect conditions, but from adjusting expectations. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop demanding that reality match your preferences. This idea feels counterintuitive today. We are taught that dissatisfaction fuels progress, and in some ways, it does. Yet dissatisfaction also prevents arrival. If improvement is always driven by rejection of the present self, then every achievement carries hidden disappointment, because the mind trained to find flaws will always find another. Imagine a person climbing a mountain believing happiness exists only at the summit. Each step feels heavy because fulfillment remains distant. But imagine another person walking the same path, understanding that walking itself is already part of living. The terrain does not change, only perception changes. One experiences strain, The other experience is participation. Stoicism teaches this shift in perception. The goal is not to eliminate effort, but to remove emotional dependence on outcomes. You act fully, but you release the demand that results must validate your worth. Improvement becomes a direction, not a condition for peace. In modern life, this distinction is rarely emphasized. Productivity culture encourages relentless evaluation. Metrics define success. Progress charts define identity. Even personal reflection becomes performance measurement. But there is a quiet cost to constant self-monitoring. When you observe yourself too closely, spontaneity disappears. Actions feel calculated. Conversations become analyzed. Emotions become problems to solve rather than experiences to understand. You stop trusting natural responses. The Stoics practiced awareness, but not obsession. They examined thoughts to free themselves from unnecessary suffering, not to engineer flawless personalities. Marcus Aurelius wrote reflections not to perfect himself endlessly, but to remind himself of simplicity, to return attention to what truly mattered. He understood that the human mind easily invents complexity where none is. Required modern self-improvement often promises control over uncertainty. Yet life remains unpredictable regardless of preparation. Relationships change. Opportunities vanish. Health fluctuates. External stability can never be guaranteed. When peace depends on controlling these variables, anxiety becomes inevitable. Stoicism proposes a different foundation. Anchor peace in what cannot be taken away: your judgment, your response, your character in the present moment. This shift reduces psychological friction. You no longer chase control over everything. Instead, you refine how you meet whatever arrives. A practical example appears in failure. Under optimization culture, failure signals inadequacy. The mind immediately searches for self-correction. What did I do wrong? How can I improve faster? How do I avoid this feeling again? A Stoic perspective asks a quieter question. Was the effort honest? If yes, the outcome loses its power to disturb inner stability. Growth continues, but self-condemnation fades. This approach transforms emotional experience. You still learn, but you do not carry unnecessary weight. Many people fear that reducing pressure will reduce ambition. The Stoics observed the opposite. When fear disappears, action becomes clearer. Energy once spent on self-doubt becomes available for meaningful effort. Calm focus replaces frantic striving. You act because action aligns with your values, not because you are trying to escape inadequacy. Over time, this creates a subtle sense of independence. You begin noticing that external approval matters less. Progress feels satisfying, but not essential to self-worth. Moments of stillness no longer feel threatening. You rediscover something modern. Culture rarely teaches the ability to simply exist without evaluation. This is not laziness. It is psychological freedom. And yet, one question remains. There is a moment that many people experience, but rarely recognize. It happens late at night, after the productivity apps are closed, after the motivational videos end, when the noise of improvement finally fades. you sit quietly, and instead of feeling accomplished, you feel strangely uneasy. Your mind begins searching for what still needs fixing. Another skill to learn. Another weakness to correct. Another version of yourself waiting somewhere ahead. There is a quiet reason the cycle of self-improvement is so difficult to escape. It is not simply social pressure, nor the influence of modern culture alone. The deeper force lies within the structure of the human mind itself. Beneath every attempt to become better often lives a hidden hope, the hope of becoming someone who no longer feels uncertainty, insecurity, or emotional pain. In other words, self-improvement promises psychological escape. You rarely notice this at first. The goals appear practical: better habits, stronger discipline, clearer thinking. But gradually, improvement begins to carry emotional meaning. You are no longer exercising just for health. You are trying to outrun self. You are not only working harder, you are trying to silence the fear of being insignificant. Progress becomes a shield against uncomfortable feelings. The mind learns a powerful association. Movement equals relief. Each new goal temporarily reduces anxiety because it creates direction. The moment you decide to change your life, hope appears. Dopamine rises. Motivation feels energizing. For a short time, the future looks cleaner than the present. But this relief does not come from achievement itself. It comes from distraction, the mind shifting attention away from current discomfort toward imagined transformation. When the excitement fades, the old feelings quietly return. And so the cycle repeats. A new plan, a new routine, a new version of yourself waiting somewhere ahead. This pattern resembles addiction more than growth. The Stoics observed that humans suffer not because they desire improvement, but because they attach emotional salvation to outcomes beyond their control. Epictetus taught that people become enslaved when they believe external change will resolve internal unrest. The object changes wealth, status, discipline, perfection, but the psychological mechanism remains the same. You believe peace is conditional. Modern psychology confirms what Stoic philosophers intuited centuries ago. The brain is wired to chase novelty and anticipation. Anticipation produces stronger emotional stimulation than possession. The pursuit feels alive. Arrival feels ordinary. This is why achieving goals often creates only brief satisfaction before restlessness returns. The ego survives through becoming, not being. To the ego, stillness feels dangerous. If you stop striving, you may be forced to confront unresolved emotions: fear, loneliness, uncertainty about meaning. Constant improvement provides identity. It gives you a story. You are evolving, progressing, moving forward. Without that story, the mind faces silence, and silence exposes questions without easy answers. Who are you if you are not improving? This question unsettles many people more than failure itself. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that identity should not depend on reputation or achievement, because both remain unstable. Instead, he focused on character expressed moment by moment. The Stoic idea of self was not something to construct endlessly, but something revealed through present action. Modern culture reverses this idea. It encourages constructing an ideal self-image first, then struggling endlessly to match it. You create standards shaped by comparison and expectation, then judge yourself against them daily. The gap between reality and ideal becomes a permanent source of tension. And yet, the gap itself is imaginary. You are comparing a living, changing human experience to a mental abstraction. The ideal self never exists in reality. It exists only as thought. But the emotional consequences feel real. Shame, urgency, inadequacy, all emerge from chasing an image rather than inhabiting the present person you already are. The Stoics approached improvement differently. They practiced refinement without self-rejection. Their discipline was not fueled by dislike of themselves, but by alignment with reason and virtue. Improvement meant removing excess desires, not accumulating endless expectations. Seneca compared unnecessary desires to carrying heavy luggage on a long journey. The weight slows you, yet you believe the burden is necessary. Only when you set it down do you realize movement becomes easier. Many modern forms of self-improvement add psychological luggage. More routines, more standards, more optimization layers. Each one promises control but increases mental load. Eventually, life begins to feel like maintenance rather than experience. You wake not to live, but to manage systems designed to improve living. This creates subtle alienation from yourself. Actions feel strategic rather than natural. Even relaxation becomes scheduled performance. You meditate to become calmer later, instead of noticing calm already available in simple awareness. The Stoics practiced attention to the present because they recognized a fundamental truth. Peace is not produced by rearranging life perfectly, but by understanding how perception shapes experience. Consider two people facing the same difficulty. One interprets the challenge as proof of inadequacy. The other sees it as a natural part of existence. The external situation remains identical, yet emotional suffering differs dramatically. The difference lies not in circumstance, but in judgment. Epictetus summarized this insight simply. People are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. When self-improvement becomes obsessive, it subtly teaches you that discomfort should not exist. Every negative emotion becomes a flaw requiring correction. But emotions are signals, not errors. Attempting to eliminate them completely creates resistance against normal human experience. The Stoic approach does not eliminate emotion. It removes unnecessary attachment to emotional reactions. You feel frustration without believing it defines you. You experience uncertainty without rushing to escape it through constant change. This acceptance weakens the ego's addiction to becoming someone else. A surprising calm begins to appear when you stop treating yourself as unfinished. Effort remains, but urgency fades. You still pursue meaningful goals, yet your emotional stability no longer depends on reaching them quickly. You begin noticing that much of your previous striving came from misunderstanding control. You tried to control outcomes, impressions, future feelings, all inherently unstable. Stoicism redirects effort toward what remains truly yours: intention, attention, and choice in the present moment. This shift reduces internal conflict. Instead of fighting yourself, you cooperate with reality. Daily life becomes quieter. Small moments regain significance. Waiting in line no longer feels wasted. A walk becomes enough without needing optimization. Conversations unfold without internal evaluation. You rediscover experiences previously overshadowed by Ironically, when you stop chasing transformation obsessively, genuine transformation begins. Because clarity emerges in stillness, not pressure. The ego fears this realization because it dissolves the illusion that fulfillment exists elsewhere. If peace can exist now, then endless striving loses its emotional justification. Improvement becomes optional rather than urgent. And this is where Stoicism reveals its most radical idea. Tranquility does not come from becoming extraordinary, but from understanding what is already sufficient. Yet one final challenge remains. Even after understanding these ideas intellectually, the habits of striving persist. The modern world continuously pulls attention outward, reigniting comparison and desire. Knowing the Stoic path is different from living it. In the next part, we will explore practical Stoic shifts that allow you to pursue growth without losing inner peace. How to act fully in the world while remaining psychologically free from the endless demand to become someone else. At some point, understanding alone stops being enough. You may recognize the endless cycle of striving. You may see how the pursuit of constant self-improvement creates tension instead of peace. Yet awareness does not immediately dissolve habit. The mind continues reaching forward, searching for the next upgrade, the next correction, the next version of yourself that promises relief. This is where Stoicism becomes practical rather than philosophical. The Stoics never intended their teachings to remain abstract ideas. Their philosophy was designed for daily living, for ordinary moments filled with uncertainty, disappointment, ambition, and desire. They understood that humans cannot simply stop striving. Action is part of our nature. The goal, therefore, was not to abandon improvement, but to transform the way improvement is pursued. The first shift begins with redefining success. Modern culture measures success through outcomes, achievements, recognition, visible progress. These metrics appear objective, yet they depend heavily on circumstances beyond your control. A promotion requires opportunity. Recognition depends on others' opinions. Even personal milestones rely on timing, health, and chance, when peace depends on outcomes. Your emotional state becomes fragile. Epictetus offered a radical alternative. He suggested measuring success only by what belongs fully to you, your intentions and your effort. If you act with honesty, clarity, and discipline, then success already exists within the action itself, regardless of result. This changes how effort feels. Imagine working toward a goal while knowing that the outcome does not determine your worth. You still care deeply, but anxiety softens. You prepare carefully, yet you release the demand for certainty. Effort becomes focused rather than tense. You act because acting well is meaningful, not because success must validate you. This single adjustment reduces enormous psychological pressure. The second Stoic shift involves redefining control. Many people intellectually understand the phrase "focus on what you can control," yet rarely apply it fully. The mind subtly expands control into areas it cannot truly govern: how others perceive you, how quickly progress happens, how life unfolds according to plans. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to return attention inward whenever frustration appeared. If something disturbed him, he examined whether the disturbance came from external reality or from his expectation about reality. Often, it was expectation. Consider a simple situation. You work hard on a project that receives little recognition. The external event is neutral. Effort followed by limited response. Suffering emerges when expectation insists that effort must produce acknowledgement. Remove the expectation, and disappointment loses intensity. The Stoics practiced releasing invisible contracts with reality. You stop demanding that life reward you in specific ways. Instead, you treat each action as complete in itself. This mindset does not eliminate ambition. It stabilizes it. You remain active without becoming emotionally dependent on results. A third shift involves changing your relationship with time. Self-improvement. Culture constantly pushes attention toward the future. You are encouraged to plan, optimize, and prepare endlessly. While planning has value, excessive future focus creates psychological absence from the present moment. Seneca warned that people sacrifice today while waiting for a perfected tomorrow. They postpone peace, believing it must be earned through enough preparation. Stoicism invites you to treat the present moment not as a stepping stone, but as the main event of existence. The future is uncertain. The past cannot be altered. Only the present allows action, perception, and choice. When you fully inhabit the present, striving changes character. You still move forward, but without abandoning where you stand now. Growth becomes continuous participation rather than delayed living. You may notice this shift during ordinary activities. Eating without distraction feels richer. Conversations deepen when you are not mentally rehearsing responses. Work becomes clearer when attention is undivided. These experiences appear simple, yet they restore a sense of completeness often lost in constant optimization. The fourth Stoic practice addresses comparison directly. Comparison thrives on incomplete information. You compare your internal struggles with another person's external image. Social media intensifies this distortion, presenting curated moments as entire realities. The mind interprets these images as standards, generating silent dissatisfaction. The Stoics countered comparison through voluntary perspective shifts. They practiced imagining loss, not as pessimism, but as clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that everything he valued was temporary. This awareness reduced envy and increased appreciation. When you understand that every person carries unseen struggles, comparison weakens naturally. You stop measuring worth against illusions. Gratitude replaces rivalry. Another practical Stoic shift involves reframing discomfort. Modern improvement culture treats discomfort as an obstacle to eliminate quickly. Stoicism treats discomfort as neutral information. Difficulty does not automatically signal failure. It signals engagement with reality. When exercise feels hard, When conversations feel awkward, when progress slows, the Stoic response is not self-criticism, but observation. Difficulty becomes expected rather than threatening. This expectation removes emotional resistance. You begin experiencing challenges without interpreting them as personal inadequacy. Over time, resilience grows quietly, not through forcing toughness, but through reducing unnecessary emotional interpretation. Perhaps the most transformative shift, however, concerns identity itself. Instead of defining yourself by achievements or goals, Stoicism encourages defining yourself by principles. You are not someone valuable because you succeed. You are someone committed to acting with integrity, patience, courage, and clarity. Principles remain stable even when circumstances change. A person grounded in principles can fail externally while remaining internally steady. This stability produces a form of confidence deeper than achievement-based pride. You trust your ability to respond, not your ability to control outcomes. Life begins to feel lighter. You still pursue improvement, but without the quiet fear that drives exhaustion. Ambition transforms into expression. Discipline becomes self-respect rather than punishment. Rest no longer feels like weakness because your worth does not depend on constant motion. You rediscover balance between effort and acceptance, and something unexpected happens. When peace is no longer postponed, motivation becomes cleaner. You work because you choose to, not because you must escape yourself. Creativity increases. Relationships feel less transactional. Time slows slightly, allowing moments to register fully. The Stoics believe tranquility emerges not from withdrawing from life, but from engaging with it wisely. Yet one final insight remains, perhaps the most important of all. Even after adopting Stoic practices, the modern world will continue encouraging endless striving. Advertisements, productivity advice, and social expectations. At some point, understanding alone stops being enough. You may recognize the endless cycle of striving. You may see how the pursuit of constant self-improvement creates tension instead of peace. Yet awareness does not immediately dissolve habit. The mind continues, reaching forward, searching for the next upgrade, the next correction, the next version of yourself that promises relief. There comes a quiet turning point in understanding Stoicism, a moment when the question is no longer how to improve your life, but how to live within it without losing yourself. By now, you may recognize the pattern clearly. The endless pursuit of becoming better promised peace but often delivered restlessness. The desire to perfect yourself slowly replaced the ability to simply exist. And yet, the world around you has not changed. Expectations remain. Messages urging optimization continue. Productivity is still praised. Comparison still appears effortlessly. The challenge, then, is not escaping modern life, but learning how to move through it without surrendering your inner stability. This is where Stoicism reveals its most practical wisdom. Peace is not found by rejecting ambition, but by placing ambition in its proper role. The Stoics never advocated withdrawal from society. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire. Seneca advised political leaders. Epictetus taught students, preparing for active lives. Their philosophy was forged inside responsibility, uncertainty, and pressure conditions remarkably similar to the modern world. What distinguished them was not what they did, but how they understood what they were doing. They recognized a simple truth: life will always present opportunities for improvement, but improvement must never become a condition for self-acceptance. When self-acceptance depends on future achievement, the present moment becomes emotionally unsafe. You live as if standing trial before an invisible judge, constantly evaluated against expectations. But when acceptance exists first, effort becomes free from desperation. You act fully, yet you are not trying to earn permission to exist. This subtle shift changes how you experience success and failure. Success becomes pleasant, but not necessary. Failure becomes informative, but not destructive. Emotional stability no longer swings violently with external events. You begin to feel grounded. Imagine approaching your goals with commitment while understanding that your value does not increase or decrease with outcomes. You still prepare carefully. You still learn from mistakes. But beneath action exists a quiet assurance that nothing essential about you is at risk. This assurance is what the Stoics called inner freedom. Inner freedom does not mean life becomes easy. Difficulties remain inevitable. People misunderstand you. Plans collapse. Unexpected loss appears. Stoicism never promised control over fate. Instead, it promised resilience independent of fate. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle itself becomes the way forward. This idea is often misunderstood as motivational optimism. In truth, it reflects acceptance. Obstacles are not meaningful because they guarantee success, but because they offer opportunities to practice character, patience, courage, clarity. When character becomes the focus, circumstances lose their power to define your emotional state. You stop asking, "Is my life going according to plan?" and begin asking, "Am I responding wisely to what is happening?" This question returns control to the only place it truly exists. Living this way requires ongoing awareness because modern environments continuously encourage dissatisfaction. Advertising functions by convincing you that something is missing. Social comparison suggests others are ahead. Even well-intentioned advice often implies urgency: improve faster, achieve sooner, become more. The Stoic response is not resistance through anger, but observation through clarity. You learn to notice when desire is artificially created. You pause before accepting new standards as necessary. You question whether striving comes from genuine values or borrowed expectations. Gradually, discernment replaces impulse. You may still pursue excellence, but you choose goals consciously rather than absorbing them unconsciously. Some ambitions lose importance. Others deepen because they align with meaning rather than fear. Life becomes simpler, not because responsibilities disappear, but because internal conflict decreases. A person living stoically appears calm, not because they lack ambition, but because their ambition no longer threatens their peace. This calmness influences relationships as well. When you stop treating yourself as incomplete, you stop expecting others to complete you. Conversations become less performative. Listening becomes easier. You no longer seek validation in every interaction because your identity does not depend on approval. Connection grows naturally when self-defense fades. Even solitude changes character. Instead of feeling like absence, it becomes restoration. Without constant comparison, silence becomes comfortable. Thoughts slow. Awareness expands. You rediscover the ability to observe life rather than constantly evaluate it. In these moments, a profound realization often emerges. Peace was never absent. It was obscured by relentless mental activity, by the belief that fulfillment required transformation into someone else. The Stoics understood that humans suffer less from reality than from resistance to reality. When resistance softens, ordinary existence reveals unexpected richness. A walk feels sufficient. A quiet morning holds depth. Work becomes engagement rather than proof of worth. Nothing extraordinary needs to happen for life to feel meaningful. This realization does not eliminate growth. Instead, growth becomes organic. You improve because learning is natural, not because you are running from inadequacy. Progress unfolds steadily, without urgency. You become patient with yourself in ways modern culture rarely encourages. Patience creates durability. Over time, the fear of falling behind loses intensity because you recognize there was never a universal timeline. Each life unfolds uniquely. Comparison fades when you understand that meaning cannot be standardized. You begin trusting process rather than chasing outcomes. And perhaps the greatest transformation is this. The voice inside your mind grows quieter. Not silent, but kinder. Less demanding, more observant than judgmental. You still notice areas for growth, but criticism no longer dominates awareness. You become an ally to yourself rather than a constant supervisor. The Stoics believed this internal harmony was the foundation of a good life. Not perfection, not endless success, but alignment between thought, action, and acceptance of reality. As you move forward, self-improvement does not disappear. It simply returns to its rightful place, a tool rather than a master. You may still wake early, learn new skills, pursue meaningful goals. But now these actions arise from clarity, not pressure. You improve your life without abandoning it. And perhaps this is the deepest Stoic lesson hidden beneath centuries of philosophy. Peace is not something you achieve after becoming enough. Peace is what allows you to grow without fear of never being enough. So the next time you feel the urge to fix everything about yourself, pause for a moment. Notice why there comes a quiet turning point in understanding Stoicism. A moment when the question is no longer how to improve your life, but how to live within it without losing yourself. By now, you may recognize the pattern clearly. The endless pursuit of becoming better promised peace but often delivered restlessness. The desire to perfect yourself slowly replaced the ability to simply exist.